Eleanor Walsh's stiletto heels clicked against the marble floor of her penthouse as she gathered her designer briefcase. Another day of board meetings awaited the CEO of Walsh Enterprises. At 42, Eleanor had built her technology empire. From the ground up, after inheriting a modest family business, her auburn hair was swept into a perfect chignon, her tailored navy suit immaculate. "Olivia, darling." "We're running late," she called, checking her diamond watch. 6-year-old Olivia appeared in a school uniform, her copper curls bouncing. Unlike her mother's calculated movements, Olivia radiated unfiltered joy. "Coming, Mommy." Eleanor softened at the sight of her daughter. Olivia was everything the center of a life that had grown increasingly lonely despite Eleanor's success. Raising her alone after Jonathan's death 3 years ago had been challenging, but Eleanor Walsh never showed weakness. "Thomas should be waiting downstairs," Eleanor said, referencing her driver of 2 years. The elevator descended to the lobby, where a black town car waited. Thomas Reed stood beside it, his tall frame in a simple black suit. At 45, his dark hair showed touches of silver at the temples, and laugh lines framed kind brown eyes. "Good morning, Ms. Walsh, Miss Olivia," he said with a gentle smile. "Morning, Thomas." Olivia chirped while Eleanor simply nodded. Thomas helped Eleanor with her briefcase before opening Olivia's door. The little girl climbed in, chattering about her upcoming school play. "I'm going to be a star, Thomas. Will you come watch me?" "If your mother approves, I'd be honored," he replied. His eyes briefly meeting Eleanor's in the rearview mirror. Eleanor felt that familiar discomfort Thomas's presence always stirred something she'd buried long ago. She focused on her phone, reviewing emails during the drive to Olivia's private school. When they arrived, Thomas stepped out to open Olivia's door. The little girl gathered her backpack and lunchbox, then unexpectedly threw her arms around Thomas's waist. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. Squeezing him tight before skipping toward the school entrance, Eleanor froze, her phone slipping from her fingers. Thomas stood motionless, his expression unreadable as he met Eleanor's wide eyes. "Ms. Walsh," he finally said, his voice barely audible. Eleanor couldn't speak. In those 2 innocent words, her carefully constructed world had begun to crack. Boston, 15 years earlier. Eleanor Bennett was 27, working at her father's struggling technology firm. She wore sensible shoes and carried a battered leather satchel filled with innovative ideas her father dismissed. That rainy Tuesday, her car broke down on Commonwealth Avenue. Thomas Reed, a talented mechanical engineer at a rival company, stopped to help. Their connection was immediate, his quiet confidence matching her fierce determination. Within weeks, they were inseparable. "We could build something together," Thomas had whispered one night as they lay beneath the stars on his apartment rooftop. "Your business mind, my technical skills." Eleanor believed him. For 8 months, they planned their future till her father's company faced bankruptcy. The solution came in the form of Jonathan Blackwood, heir to Blackwood Industries, who offered a merger through marriage. "You must do this, Eleanor," her father had insisted. "Think of our employees, our family legacy." When she told Thomas, he'd stared at her with those steady brown eyes. "I understand," he'd said, though his voice cracked. "But you're making the right choice." She'd expected him to fight for her. His quiet acceptance felt like confirmation that their love wasn't enough. Eleanor married Jonathan, secured the company's future, and eventually took control when her father retired. Jonathan died 3 years ago in a skiing accident, leaving her with immense wealth and little else except Olivia, the one pure thing from their cordial but loveless marriage. Thomas reappeared 2 years ago, applying to be her driver after losing his engineering position during a corporate downsizing. Eleanor hired him against her better judgment. She told herself it was pity, but seeing him each day rekindled something she thought long extinguished now. Sitting in the back of the town car after Olivia's innocent slip, Eleanor stared at Thomas's profile as he drove toward her office. "She doesn't understand what she's saying?" Eleanor finally broke the silence. "Children get confused." Thomas nodded. "Of course, Ms. Walsh, this is inappropriate." "Perhaps we should discuss your position, please," Thomas interrupted, his knuckles White on the steering wheel? Olivia needs stability. I promise this won't happen again. Eleanor studied him. Why did you come back, Thomas? Of all the jobs in Boston, why this one? Thomas pulled the car to the curb, turning to face her. I lost everything when the economy crashed. My company, my savings. He paused. But seeing you again wasn't planned. When I recognized your name in the job listing, I almost didn't apply. But I needed work, and he stopped. And what? Eleanor pressed. I wanted to see that you were happy, he finished softly. That's all I ever wanted. Eleanor watched from her home office window as Thomas pushed Olivia on the garden swing. It was Saturday, and Eleanor had been surprised when Olivia asked if Thomas could stay after driving them home from her ballet lesson. More surprising was Eleanor's own agreement. Higher, Thomas, higher. Olivia's laughter floated through the open window. Hold tight, princess, Thomas cautioned, his strong hands. Carefully guiding the swing, Eleanor's throat tightened. For 3 weeks since the dad incident, she'd observed their interactions with new awareness. Thomas treated Olivia with genuine affection, helping with her math homework, while waiting for Eleanor's meetings to end. Listening intently to her elaborate stories. Teaching her to fold paper cranes when she was restless. He never overstepped boundaries. Always addressing Eleanor formally, maintaining professional distance. Yet with Olivia, he showed a natural paternal instinct that Jonathan had never demonstrated. Eleanor's assistant, Patricia, entered with documents needing signatures. He's good with her, Patricia noted, following Eleanor's gaze. He's an employee, Eleanor replied sharply. Patricia, who had worked with Eleanor for 12 years, raised an eyebrow. Is that all? Eleanor signed the papers without answering. Later, that evening, after Thomas had gone home and Olivia was bathed and in pajamas, Eleanor sat on her daughter's bed for their nightly routine. Mommy, why don't I have a daddy like Sophie and Emma? Olivia asked suddenly. Eleanor smoothed Olivia's copper curls. You had a daddy. He was called Jonathan, and he loved you very much, but he went to heaven when you were little. Olivia considered this. I don't remember him. You were only 3, Eleanor said gently. Is that why I sometimes think Thomas is my daddy? Because I need one? Eleanor's heart pounded. What makes you think that about Thomas? Olivia shrugged. He smiles at me like Sophie's daddy smiles at her. And he knows how to fix my toys, and he listens to all my stories, even the really long ones. She yawned. And he looks at you the way princes look at princesses in my books. Eleanor kissed her daughter's forehead, mind racing. It's bedtime, darling. After Olivia fell asleep, Eleanor poured herself a glass of wine and stepped onto her. Penthouse terrace. The Boston skyline glittered before her the empire she'd built. It's a success she'd achieved. Yet standing alone in the cool night air, Eleanor Walsh, who had everything, felt the emptiness of having no one to share it with. No one except a little girl who saw through the carefully constructed facades to the lonely hearts beneath. Rain pounded against the windows of Eleanor's office as Thomas entered with her forgotten tablet. The Walsh Enterprises building was nearly empty at 8 p.m., most employees long gone. Thank you, Thomas. You could have left this until morning, Eleanor said, accepting the device. I was nearby, he replied, turning to leave. Wait, the word escaped before Eleanor could stop it. Why didn't you fight for me? Thomas stood motionless, his back to her. Excuse me. 15 years ago. You just let me go. Eleanor's voice trembled. You said you understood that I was making the right choice. Thomas turned slowly. What would you have had me do? Your father made it clear a penniless engineer wasn't good enough for his daughter. The merger with Blackwood was your family's salvation. You could have told me we'd find another way. Would you have believed me? Thomas's eyes held hers. You were raised to put duty first, Eleanor. I respected that about you. Eleanor stood, moving around her desk. And now? Why stay in this position, driving the woman who chose money over you? Is that what you think happened? Thomas asked quietly. That I see this as some rich woman's rejection? I stayed because... He hesitated, because... Eleanor pressed. Because I see how lonely you are, he admitted. How hard you work to give Olivia everything. Because despite everything, I never stopped. He cut himself off. Never stopped what? Thomas ran a hand through his hair. Caring about you? And Olivia? What about when she called you Dad? Pain flashed across his face. I would never presume, but you care for her too, Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. How could I not? She's extraordinary. She has your spirit, your intelligence, your heart. His voice softened. But I know my place, Eleanor. I've never encouraged her to see me as anything but your employee, yet she does. Eleanor whispered. She sees what I've been trying not to see. Thomas stepped closer. And what's that? Eleanor's carefully maintained composure cracked. That you're the only man who's ever truly known me. And the only one who's shown Olivia what a father should be. Morning sunlight streamed through the bay windows of Eleanor's Beacon Hill townhouse, a recent purchase, smaller than her penthouse, but with a garden Olivia adored. The scent of coffee filled the kitchen where Eleanor stood in jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. Thomas entered from the garden, carrying fresh flowers. The gardenia is blooming, he said, placing them in a vase. Mommy, Thomas, come see my fort, Olivia called from the living room, where she'd transformed the furniture with blankets. Eleanor smiled at Thomas. We'd better inspect this architectural marvel. They crawled into the makeshift tent where Olivia had arranged her stuffed animals for a tea party. As they pretended to sip from empty cups, Eleanor marveled at how much had changed in 6 months. After their confrontation in her office, Eleanor had made the most difficult decision of her career, stepping back from day-to-day operations at Walsh Enterprises to focus on what truly mattered. She'd promoted Patricia to coup, maintaining strategic oversight, while reclaiming time for herself and Olivia. Thomas had resigned as her driver to accept Eleanor's offer to head a new charitable foundation using Walsh technologies to support educational initiatives in underserved communities. I think it's time, Eleanor whispered to Thomas, as Olivia arranged her teddy bears. He squeezed her hand in understanding. Olivia, sweetheart, Eleanor began. Remember how you once asked about daddies? Olivia nodded solemnly. Well, sometimes life takes unexpected turns. Thomas and I knew each other a long time ago, before you were born. We cared about each other. Very much. But sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Like when I spilled juice on your computer? Olivia asked. Eleanor laughed softly. A bit bigger than that. The truth is, Thomas and I should have stayed together, but we didn't. And now that we've found each other again, we've realized something important. Thomas moved closer. Olivia, I want you to know that I care about you and your mother very much, but I would never try to replace your real father. But you feel like my dad, Olivia said with a child's simple honesty. Is that okay? Thomas's eyes glistened. If that's how you feel, then I'm the luckiest man in the world. Eleanor watched as Olivia climbed into Thomas's lap, completely at ease. So are you going to be my dad for real now? Eleanor and Thomas exchanged glances. We're going to be a family, Eleanor confirmed. If that's what you want, Olivia beamed. I knew it. I told my teacher that sometimes families find each other even when it takes a really long time. As Olivia returned to her toys, Thomas pulled Eleanor close. Who would have thought a child's innocent words could rebuild what pride and circumstance tore apart? Elena rested her head on his shoulder. She saw what was in our hearts before we were brave enough to admit it. Outside, the gardenia Thomas had planted bloomed late, but perfectly, testament to second chances and love that, given time, finds its way home. Later that evening, as Thomas tucked Olivia into bed, Eleanor watched from the doorway, her heart full. The little girl's eyes were already drooping as Thomas finished reading her favorite story. Thomas, Olivia murmured sleepily, I'm glad you came back to us. Me too, princess, he whispered, kissing her forehead, as they quietly left the room. A notification pinged on Eleanor's phone. She glanced down to see an email from her father, the first contact in years. The subject line read, I heard about Thomas. Perhaps I was wrong. Eleanor smiled, tucking the phone away. Some bridges could be rebuilt after all. That night, as Thomas and Eleanor stood on the terrace under the stars, slipped a simple silver ring onto her finger, the same one he'd offered 15 years ago, dipped in hope through all the years apart. A perfect circle, Eleanor whispered, like us. What neither of them noticed was Olivia watching from her bedroom window, clutching her favorite teddy bear with a satisfied smile. She'd known all along that Thomas was meant to be her dad sometimes. She thought children had to help grown-ups find their way home.